As we inch closer to opening day, we are joined by an expert on all things Cleveland Indians. He covers the Tribe for The Athletic. He's in year 10 covering the Indians, and what a 10th year it is to be covering this team. It's Zack Meisel joining us here on Indians Baseball Insider Breakdown. And Zack, opening week is here. It's hard to believe that July 24th is categorized as opening day. What, or rather, how would you describe what it's been like to cover baseball in these current conditions?
Well, kind of like the apocalypse, or I feel like I'm in an episode of The Walking Dead. It's strange. It's eerie. It's all different. I'm excited for the sprint, the 60-game season, and the feeling like every game matters so much, but it's still going to be weird. It's not going to feel right. And I was thinking about opening day, and normally it's March or April, and every bar downtown is packed with people wearing heavy winter coats and winter caps, and you get people who run into the ballpark the second it opens because they want to load up on beer so that they have that alcohol coat to keep them warm all day. And it's just going to be so different. It's going to be late July. There will be no one in the ballpark, and it'll be 90 degrees. It seems off. We all know that it's different and that this season is unlike any other. So hopefully we can embrace the chaos and the weirdness and make some fun out of it.
When you think about this Indians team, let's get right to it. The expectation when you have Terry Francona as your skipper, you've got Francisco Lindor on your team, and certainly there's players around him and there's a pitching staff that's stable. Expectation is for this team that they can win a championship. What determines, in your mind, how far the Indians go?
That's the question, is what sort of ingredients are going to decide which teams prosper and which teams flop? Because in a 60-game season, I mean, we've seen it. Everyone has talked about how the Nationals wouldn't have been a playoff team last year. Everyone has talked about how there's always some random team that looks like it deserves to be in the basement, has the talent level of a last-place team, and then through 60 games, somehow it's 33-27 and it's hanging around. That happens every year. Now, if it happens this year, that's going to be potentially a playoff team for a team that had no business making the playoffs. So I look at the Indians and I think, okay, starting pitching depth is good. They're going to lean heavily on those guys. That's an advantage for sure. If Bieber and Clevenger and Carrasco are right, if Savali and Plesac take steps forward, if one of those guys doesn't, maybe you have Adam Plutko waiting in the wings. So that's a good thing. I look at the lineup. I think it can be better than what people expect. You have superstars in Ramirez and Lindor, Santana, who can carry a lineup for a couple weeks if other guys are cold. Framil Reyes seems poised to hit tons of home runs. So the lineup could be good. The bullpen is a question mark, and the bullpen is going to be important this season because you have the 3-batter minimum rule. You have expanded rosters. So there are a lot of people you can turn to, but there's no time to figure out who you can trust and who you can't. So this is a long-winded way of saying I have no idea. They have some of the elements that you would think would help them, but if you have a rough week, if you have a rough 10 days, that could be it. And there's no recovering from it. So we're going to see some teams. I don't know that any team is safe. Like, I think the Dodgers and Yankees, I'd feel pretty confident in betting that they're going to make the playoffs. But, I feel a lot more comfortable over 162 games than I would 60 games. So no team should feel comfortable right now, and that's going to make this fun.
What kind of a difference does having Terry Francona as your skipper make in this shortened season?
It helps. I mean, the experience, the history, the track record of not experimenting, but being innovative. And I know some people will roll their eyes and say, well, he's certainly not infallible. I think it's more the combination of Francona and the front office, because they talk about this stuff after every single game. Mike Chernoff, Chris Antonetti, and Terry Francona will sit in the manager's office and talk about what they can do differently, what they can do better, what's working and what's not. And, history would indicate these guys are pretty smart. And so you would think that they'll try to find some competitive advantages. I was sitting here thinking, how can they get creative with the rotation and the pitching staff? Because we don't really feel confident in the bullpen. but the rotation, is a strength. So could they piggyback some starters? Could they go with a 4-man rotation? Are there ways they could be creative? And then they came out and said, hey, we're going with the standard and we're going to rely on these guys and hope that they can pitch 6-7 innings out of the chute. That tells me that they thought about this, because I think other teams will try unconventional things and you don't know if it's going to work or not. So they're creative. And, usually when this brain trust gets together, they come up with the right decisions. So you would think that would help them. But again, there's no trial and error period. And Terry Francona is a guy who is loyal to players, who is patient, and this season doesn't really cater to that.
It's interesting because each time Tito's been asked about the bullpen, he has preached patience. That has been the message because of the 3-batter minimum rule. Talk about some of these rule changes, and one argument is, well, it's a shortened season. Why not try it? The other is there's no time to adjust here. There's really no time to ease your way in. You get through 2 series of the season, and it's hard to believe, but you're through a 10th of your season already. And I think it bears noting here that if you're walking into this Indian season and you follow the team and you sit there and say, okay, 7, 8, 9, what's the combination look like? There is not an answer set in stone right now. And what the Indians do between that 6th and 8th inning, that seems to be up in the air.
Yeah, that could be the deciding factor on whether this team sinks or swims. I mean, think about how many poor outings or blown saves does it normally take for a closer to lose his job, right? 4 in a row. Well, every game this season counts as almost 3 games in a normal season. So you're basically saying 1 or 2 and you're out. Well, that's a really tough, that's a tightrope that you have to walk. So it's going to be difficult. I mean, you need Brad Hand throwing 93, not 90. You need his slider to be sharp. You need James Karinchak to be throwing strikes. You need Oliver Perez to be able to get right-handers out. You need Adam Simber to be able to get left-handers out. You need Nick Wickren to be reliable. I mean, it's really tough. And a lot of teams are going to deal with this because bullpens are volatile from year to year anyway. They haven't had the normal ramp-up period. But for the Indians, I look at that bullpen, and there's really not a single person that I can confidently say that guy is going to deliver and I can count on him whenever I need. And that's a problem. That's why I thought maybe they do something creative with the bullpen or with the rotation, put one of the starters in the bullpen. But, we'll see. There's no time for trial and error. So, that error can end your season.
Let's turn to the outfield. Indians brought 10 outfielders to camp in Cleveland, and the depth has been on display in several ways. What have you taken away from Bradley Zimmer's rise, and do you think he's done enough to be on that opening day roster?
It's remarkable. I mean, this guy hasn't had a normal season with regular at-bats in the minors or majors since 2017, and it's not going to happen this year either because of everything going on. So he's going to go for 4 years without normalcy. But he's doing everything he can to make it a difficult decision for the Indians. I think he's helped by the fact that Delino DeShields probably won't be ready for opening day. The question is, how do you get the most out of guys' development, right? Like Daniel Johnson is going to start the season in Lake County, and, he's one call away. Maybe he gets a chance at some point this season, but him being on the major league roster on opening day and riding the bench for most of the season wasn't going to help his development, they thought. So, does Zimmer fall into that category, or is he better off being a pinch runner, defensive replacement, maybe starts once or twice a week? That's a good question. I think a lot also hinges on how much of Domingo Santana and Franmil Reyes they can stomach in the outfield. So they've got a lot of moving parts. They have a lot of depth. In a way, it's similar to the bullpen in that, we don't know what Jake Bauers is capable of. We don't know what Greg Allen could do with regular playing time. Or we've seen examples, but we don't know if these guys are better off than they were a year ago because they were shut down for 4 months. So it's so difficult to evaluate. But with Zimmer, it goes without saying the guy has been sensational the last few weeks. And at the very least, he's placed himself firmly in the conversation for someone who deserves a longer look and could contend for a starting outfield spot in 2021.
Zach, I think that everybody just looks at right field and they say, oh, Tyler Naquin's back. He good to go. I think what could get lost, though, a little bit is the road that he's taken here. And it comes off, just covering the team, that this is really a best-case scenario for Tyler, and it's a result of his work ethic, that he's been able to come back from that injury last summer out in Tampa Bay, and now is at a point where it looks as if it's all signals go, and he's at 100%. What can you say about his return?
If you think about it, the season was going to start March 26th. Naquin would have been on the injured list. Jordan Luplow would have been at least playing against lefties, and they wanted to see him in an everyday role. So you fast forward 4 months, and Naquin's healthy. He's going to end up missing like 25 games from having a torn ACL. That's pretty rare, I would think. And what you can do now is you can platoon these guys. And, you know, the Indians have 17 games in a row to start the season. You probably don't want Tyler Naquin coming off major knee surgery playing 17 consecutive days. Jordan Luplow has been battling some lower back issues. You don't want him playing 17 days in a row. One crushes righty or lefties. The other hits pretty well against righties. Seems like a perfect platoon to me. I mean, they had an OPS, I think, near 900 last year combined. Like, it's a good combination. And you don't have to experiment. You know, maybe Luplow can hit righties really well. Well, you can find that out next year. Maybe Naquin can hold his own against lefties. Again, you don't need to try to find that out in a 60-game season. So it's impressive the way Naquin was able to recover and finish his recovery while the sport was shut down. And you know Luplow's at least capable of hitting lefties. So you benefit in that. You don't have to – that doesn't have to be one of the experiments on opening day and one of those things that you just let play out in April and May. You can have them platoon and be a force hitting 6th or 7th in the lineup.
Let's turn to the infield. How natural of a fit has Cesar Hernandez been at second base?
Yeah, it's you don't look, nothing against Jason Kipnis, but I think you can already tell just how easy defensively things look in the middle infield, just like turning double plays, stuff like that. And you know, one thing Hernandez has done really well in his career, except for last year, is patience at the plate, drawing a ton of walks. And we saw it on display in Monday's exhibition game against the Pirates. His first at bat goes 12 pitches, and then he ropes a single up the middle. I mean, that's the dream leadoff at bat of a game for a manager. And so it's huge. They have 4 switch hitters in the infield. Those 4 players will hit 1, 2, 3, 4 in the lineup. And as much as Terry Francona would probably prefer to spread out switch hitters because he's obsessed with balance in the lineup, you think about facing an opponent late in the game, you know, they want to go to their left-hander who just destroys lefties. Well, you have 4 switch hitters. Oh, you want to go to your righty closer? Well, he's going to face 4 lefties. I mean, it's a really nice luxury to have, and it is, you know, he just made so much sense on a 1-year deal, originally to be a stopgap for Nolan Jones. Who knows what's going to happen now with no minor league season going into next year. But like you said, just such a natural fit. And if he can get on base at a good rate at the top of the order, you know, the top 5, 6 in that lineup look pretty good.
Let's turn to the rotation. If I had told you a year ago, before the season had started, that Shane Bieber would be the Indians' opening day starter in 2020, what would you have said?
Well, I would have been kind of correct because I would have guessed that there was some apocalypse or plague, right? It's an incredible rise. The Indians have gotten really good at finding guys in the draft who can fit what they do well with player development and specifically pitching development because, I mean, they're teaching the rest of the league a masterclass in that the last 5 years or so. But you know, it's amazing. He was a college walk-on, and he almost didn't play baseball in college because another guy ended up signing with the team that drafted him out of high school. Otherwise, he wouldn't have even had a walk-on spot his first year at Santa Barbara. So you think about the strides he's made, and you know, Clevenger and Trevor Bauer used to joke that when Bieber came up to the majors, he was throwing 85. You know, that number gets lower and lower every time they tell the story. So he was really throwing like 91, but Now he throws 94, and he's got 4 pitches that he can rely on at any time, and it's the confidence. I mean, he was always a guy who never walked anybody, but he had hittable stuff. Well, he's honed in on that, and now, when you have really good stuff and you throw strikes and you can put the ball wherever you want, that's what leads to a top-tier starter. And it's incredible. I mean, think of everything that's changed when he entered last year behind Kluber, Clevenger, Bauer, Carrasco. I mean, even like Danny Salazar was technically in the mix, and it's crazy. Just to think of the turnover and to think of what he's accomplished. And he's only 25. That's the thing that's most incredible to me is you look at the rotation. 6 starters if you include Plutko, Plesac, Savali. Bieber is the second youngest of those 6. And he's only 12 days older than Aaron Savali. So he's the young one of the bunch, and he might be the best of the bunch, and you might have him the longest.
It is remarkable, and it brings up the next point of the future of the organization, thinking big picture here, Zach, because every Indians fan, if you ask about the future of the organization, is going to focus on one name, and that's Francisco Lindor. And we know the stories out there, and we know the chances that are to keep him and whatnot. Maybe you have an updated feeling on that, but the feeling is look, these next 2 years, the Indians have Francisco Lindor, the rest of the league doesn't, and not to be frank, but enjoy these times, enjoy these moments. I think one general thing from the world of baseball is if Frankie Lindor goes to a destination, the thought is, well, the Indians' window has shut because they don't have Francisco Lindor. What do you say to people who would think that?
That I understand it. That's not how this organization operates. They'll never tank. They'll also never, mortgage the farm to go completely all in bananas in one specific season. And there are a few teams that even do that anymore, if you really take a look at it. But they have a good farm system. They have a young farm system. I think they can still be competitive without Lindor in a couple years. But I would say, as crazy and chaotic as this season is going to be, they need to capitalize on it because there's so much uncertainty that lies ahead, and you don't want to make any assumptions. There's definitely a chance they trade Lindor this winter. I don't know if they're going to get for him what they could have gotten 7 months ago, or in a normal season if they traded him at the midway point. But you better believe they're probably going to, I would assume they're going to try to trim more payroll. Revenue is not going to be good this year. And that's going to be across the league. So that may put Brad Hand's future in doubt. It may put Carlos Santana's future in doubt. It might put Mike Clevenger's future in doubt. So take advantage of the roster they have because it's a good roster. And you have these superstars and you have a chance to be a legitimate contender this year. So if this is the last run, you want to make the most of it. It's tough. I do think there's a possibility they just play out Lindor's contract. They probably don't want to. They'd probably rather get something for him. But, the circumstances are dictating kind of unprecedented things. So who knows? But they do have, this isn't they trade Lindor in December and they go into the AL Central basement for 5 years and then wake up in 2026. They have young talent. They still have a good, really young rotation. They still have pieces in the lineup, and you'll eventually be adding Nolan Jones, Tyler Freeman, and then way down below, and it hurts them that they lose a year of development. They have really good young prospects, 19, 20-year-olds. They're going to have a top 5 to 7 farm system in baseball in a year or two. It's just a matter of these guys getting more exposure, getting more reps. And in doing that, you also are building trade value. So there's a chance for this team, maybe to retool in 2021, maybe 2022. You go through some growing pains, and then they're back to winning 90 games in 2023. It's possible that we've seen teams trade that, the Nationals lose Bryce Harper and win the World Series. So there are ways around it, and you never really know. But there's enough young talent on this team to keep this thing afloat, regardless of what happens this winter. But saying that, like, it would be prudent to go out and make the most of the 2020 season while you have maybe the best shortstop in baseball wearing your uniform.
Absolutely. Let's turn to some fun topics here. Best walk-up song you've heard?
Whew. Well, credit to Oliver Perez for using the Macarena, which was popular when he debuted, I think.
I love Tito jokes about his. Tito's like, I don't know how old he is, but it really doesn't matter to me.
Yeah.
That's a good line.
This will be his 18th big league season, which it's a record for a Mexican-born pitcher, and I know he's really proud of that. So, pretty cool, given that his career's been all over the place. Cesar Hernandez has Mo Money, Mo Problems, Biggie, and Diddy and Mace. That's always a classic.
That's good. In terms of walk-up songs, I heard Jason Kipnis kept his saxophone, I think, in Chicago. So that was good news, too. Yeah,
there used to be a group of fans who would sit in right field, and they had, like, inflatable saxophones that they'd pretend to play every time he came up. It's stuff like that we're going to miss this year with no fans.
The fireworks guy is kept busy. That guy's going to be busy.
Is that necessary? Did they just wanted to do him a favor and keep him employed this year?
I think it makes sense, and I think it's great. I'm all for cutouts. I don't mind cutouts at all. I think we need a Hoynesy cutout right behind home plate. Like, I think there's tons of ideas you could do there. Fireworks guy's great, and I heard the drum last night. Whatever you can do. I mean, in the playoffs, if John Adams can get out there and bang on that drum himself, it doesn't matter to me. You got to keep some authenticity to baseball.
Yeah, the weirder, the more chaotic, the better in my eyes. Can we get, like, fake hecklers so that it really feels like you're on the road when you're in the field? Yeah, all that stuff is great. It's a little – the fireworks are a little awkward to me just because who is it for? I feel bad for any dogs who reside downtown. And, on Monday night they got 4, blasts out of nowhere, I think. And then another one when the game was over.
Did you see anybody outside the ballpark kind of trying to just look in?
I did. I've periodically, more so during batting practice and, like, early in the game. That's another weird. Like, if a team wins the World Series, are you going to have fans, like, gathered outside the ballpark to celebrate? Are they going to stay socially distant? Are they wearing masks? I mean, there are so many unknowns that I guess make it interesting.
Well, it's going to be a fascinating season, and I'll end on this, and you brought it up a little bit ago. I was watching some spring training interviews just to see. I was curious one night what the pulse of the organization is to what it is now, and just to hear some of the answers of what people thought. And there was an interview with Tom Hamilton, and at the end of the day, he said, look, and this applies in a 60-game season too. You're not walking into this going through the motions. And he goes, rarely have I ever walked into a camp and said to myself, oh my gosh, we're the Royals or we're the Tigers. There's not a chance in hell here. There's just not a chance. As much as we'll sit here and say 60-game season, everybody's got a shot. It bears noting, 162, 60 game, whatever it is, you said it earlier, the Indians are an organization that, based on what we've seen in this summer camp, which you've asked Tito about, the youth that's performed, the organization's still set up to be one that competes year in and year out, regardless of what happens in the short term. And I think that bears noting in these situations, especially in Cleveland, Ohio, where the state of franchises, the same can't be said about the 2 other pro sports franchises at the moment.
Well, Tom Hamilton walked into spring training in 1990, and he was with Herb Score at the time on the broadcast. It was his first year. And he was all excited. He said, we're going to win the pennant. Like, this team it's got it. And Herb Score looked at him because that team was dreadful. And he said, this team is going to be damn terrible. But he said, you can't let the listeners know that. You need to treat them as if you're calling royalty. And, every game is entertaining to listen to. And you can learn stuff. And anyway, you're right. Like, this is a lot different than those times. And it's interesting because spring training optimism runs rampant throughout the league. Whether it's a rebuilding team, you're getting to see young kids on the field and you're dreaming of their potential, or it's a contender and you're thinking about whether they can win 100 games. It's a little different now because I think there's a little more optimism across the league, no matter what sort of team you're following or you are. I think there's a chance that, some of these young teams might be looking and saying, hey, we can seize a playoff spot maybe a year or two earlier than we expected. And there are some teams that maybe, I think the majority of people thought the Twins would win the division. They probably still think the Twins would win the division. But they're certainly not as confident in that now with a 60-game season when anything can happen. And we've never had this. Baseball's always been this long, drawn-out marathon where, there's no point in paying attention in April and May because those games, they count the same, but there's so much time to recover. And for the first time ever from day one, it's going to be just an incredibly competitive environment. And it's so different than what we're used to. It's I've been saying baseball is not a sport that's easy to talk about on the radio or to supply hot takes for, because you can be made foolish the next day because they play every single day for 6 months. But this year, go ahead, fire off that hot take. Talk about it on the radio every day because every game really matters. And we haven't been able to say that before, and we'll never be able to say it again. So hope, I know it's going to be weird and some people think it shouldn't really count and you're going to have an asterisk and whatever. But hey, while it's here and there's nothing else going on, let's enjoy the chaos.
I can hear the call coming to Ken Carmen right now. Is Lindor homering too much?
Yeah, that's the sort of thing. Like, let's get those crazy takes out there. They're warranted for 1 year only.
Follow him all season long, around the clock. He's got the Indians covered throughout the year. Zack Meisel at theathletic.com, and he's on Twitter at ZACKMEISEL. Zack, thanks for taking the time here today.
You got it, John. Thank you.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.